You'd be able to go running without the dog, without a cane, and there's freedom. I felt for the first time in almost 27 years that I could walk freely without a dog, without a cane. It was such a freeing experience.
Please welcome author Cheryl McNeil Fisher, a participant in Google's Project Guideline, a project in partnership with Guiding Eyes for the Blind.
A blonde woman wearing a mask interviews. She loops the harness around her waist and lines up on the trail in high heels.
I don't walk by myself outside of my home.
I'm feeling a little nervous. I never walked without a cane or my guide dog before.
Cheryl shares her advice on authoring, on publishing, on guide dogs, and much, much more.
There's different ways, and I'm always willing to teach and help people in any way I can because it took a lot of research on my part. I did send my manuscripts out, and I got some of those rejection letters, plenty of them. I want to give back freely to what's been so freely given to me. You know, it's the way it works for us to be networking together. I wanted to get a guide dog, but I was scared. I was panicked. And then once I was there, I didn't want to leave. I was scared to leave and be back out in the real world. I can't say enough about this membership of people that I have found. And you do not need to be a member of ACB to be a part of the community calls.
Please welcome Cheryl McNeil Fisher. We hope you enjoy.
For me, I just tell people, just start, just do it, and then everything else can fall into place.
Welcome to Blind Abilities. I'm Jeff Thompson. Today in the studio, we have Cheryl McNeil Fisher, and she was with Google Project Guideline, along with Guiding Eyes for the Blind. I saw the video. It was audio described, and I was impressed. And when I heard that someone with boots and heels was on there, I said, we need to get her on the podcast. Cheryl, welcome to Blind Abilities.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, everyone else had sneakers except for me. But they weren't surprised because I wear my boots and my heels when I'm walking.
There you go. Tell us a little bit about Google's Project Guideline.
I was impressed. It started with Tom, our CEO at Guiding Eyes, asking them if they could help him as a runner. What can you do for a blind runner? And as they explained to me, it takes one person to ask a question and somebody to run with it.
At the indoor track, Thomas puts on headphones that wrap around the back of his head.
The first time we went out, we didn't even know if sound would be enough to guide me. So it's sort of that beta testing process that you go through.
Thomas jogs down the track wearing the phone and headphones. Two researchers run alongside him. A view from the phone sweeps across the ground, taking in the white and yellow lines of the track. As Thomas runs, the phone interprets the guideline, which bounces up and down in time to his stride. A guy interviews on a forested road. Text reads, Matt Hall, Android engineer.
You step left and right as you're running, so there's like a shake to the line, left and right. As soon as you start going outdoors, now the light is a lot more variable.
The phone captures outdoor footage. Graphics highlight a line down a paved path. Text introduces Dror Ayalon, creative technologist.
We didn't want to rely on any internet connection. We had to take our huge model and shrink them into something that we can run on device as fast as we need for someone to run at full speed with.
Thomas's son helps Thomas strap the phone harness around his waist. Thomas and the other people gathered all wear masks. Thomas crouches to touch a hand to the pavement. Then he stands, facing down the trail.
Well, we've been waiting for 25 years for this minute.
It's still in process, but the way it worked was they had painted a line in the park. And so I had bone connection earphones on, which set out just outside my ears. So I heard the people around me, everything around me, but I had clear sound from the audio. So anytime I veered to the left of that line, I had a tone in my ears and it would get louder if I went more to the left. Same to the right. It would start out slow and then it would get a little louder or faster to let me know that I'm veering off. So for someone who's running in a controlled environment, and a lot of times there's a line, like our indoor track at our gym has the lines, you'd be able to go running without the dog, without a cane, and there's freedom. I felt for the first time in almost 27 years that I could walk freely without a dog, without a cane, and I had people next to me to make sure I was safe. There were safety precautions, but it was such a freeing experience. And I know for Tom, when you're a marathon runner, he's had to use at least 4 dogs because the dogs can only run so far, or he'd have to run with I don't know if he's tethered to a sighted guide or what, but now this type of program, the freedom, I can't talk for him, but if you look at the video or listen to it, you can hear his response and how amazing he felt because he hasn't had that freedom to run since he lost his sight.
People with vision don't want blind people to take risks. That's what keeps people who are blind from participating in society fully. The safest thing for a blind person to do is to sit still. I ain't sitting still.
Thomas takes off down the trail.
There was no tether. There was no stick. There was no furry dog. It was just being with yourself.
He lengthens his stride as he runs along the path alone. He starts uphill.
Absolute freedom. Oh my goodness.
Thomas slows to a stop. He covers his face with his hand.
That's the first time I've run alone in decades. Just through the woods, by myself. I never thought we'd be here, I didn't think we'd ever be here.
He shakes his head incredulously. Now he meets back up with a brunette woman who holds his guide dog's leash. She hugs him.
It's independence, I'm so dependent on people every day. You, the kids, Blaze.
He takes Blaze's leash and pets the yellow lab, who wags his tail.
Just me and a line, huh?
Yeah, it's an amazing program, and I couldn't thank them enough. I had tears in my eyes just with gratitude in that Google heard the message, heard what Tom was saying, and they're continuing to work on it.
Yeah, I first heard of Thomas Panek, the CEO of Guiding Eyes for the Blind, when he was using the dogs. And I was like, 3 or 4 dogs to make it, I think he did that twice. And when this project came out, it was neat to see that Google teamed up with Guiding Eyes to put this together. Now, my understanding is the phone is strapped to your chest, so it actually has a view of the line. And I guess one of the trickiest parts of it is when you're running, you're not stationary, you're not aiming it. It's just picking up whatever it sees, and they trained the program to actually keep looking at the line and project where you're going and then give you the feedback audibly.
Right. It's a waistband. They put it on my waist, and they have a sleeve that the phone sits in, and it follows the line. And yes, as someone runs, it's going to be moving, but it's able to stay focused. Now, I was not running, but that's the idea of it. And so they're continuing to tweak it. But for this testing that we did, it worked phenomenally.
A blonde woman wearing a mask interviews. She loops the harness around her waist and lines up on the trail in high heels.
I don't walk by myself outside of my home.
I'm feeling a little nervous. I never walked without a cane or my guide dog before.
Oh, wow. And with all the technology coming along, with LiDAR starting to end up in some smartphones here, you'll be able to keep your distance from someone as you're running, pass them on the left or right. Wow.
Right. Yeah.
So how did you get involved with it? What put you in that video?
I had got a call from Guiding Eyes, and they chose a couple of us to be a part of it. I don't know why I was chosen, but I was certainly honored. I do what I can for Guiding Eyes. I've been an ambassador for them since day one. I got my first guide dog in February of 1994. When they called and asked me if I'd be open to this, I didn't know a lot about what was going to be happening because of disclosure, privacy. They didn't want it to get out in the public yet. So I didn't know much until the day before. And then even when I got there, I learned more. That's when I found out about it. We had to sign disclosure until Google was ready to release it. Yeah, they called and asked me if I'd be interested. And I rarely say no to guiding eyes. And I just said, yeah, sure. That sounds great. And I didn't realize a lot of them they didn't say anything about running because I'm not a runner, And I just said, sure. I said, I'll be there with my boots on because that's the running joke because I wear, it's 1.5 inches to 1 3/4, but I actually walk better with a heel. Same in the summer, I'll have sandals on that's got a little bit of a heel, like a wedge, because I have better balance. And I'm 5'9", but I put them on and it just gives me, I'm steadier on my feet with them. So.
And you yourself, you're a guide dog user yourself.
Since February of 1994, yeah.
So what was it like, that freedom to just let go and just go?
Amazing. I walked confidently. I felt my head up. I had good posture, and I just let out a yell at one point saying, yay, Google. And it's amazing. How can I explain it to you that the freedom, if, I've been blind, lost my sight around 1992 was the last time I drove a car, and having that freedom to be swinging both my arms, it was uncomfortable at first, because I'm not used to having both my hands free. I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do with my hands? Because usually the one's got a cane or the other. And so all of a sudden I've got this freedom. And we joked about it. I said, oh my gosh, what do I do with my hands? I got to swing them. So I said, maybe we'll just do some dancing or something out here. But it was great. And the way they took the camera, the guys, one was on a hoverboard and the other one was just walking near that person. But even the way they were doing the video was pretty neat. And then of course it started to rain a little, but it was freeing. It was exhilarating. I mean, you could probably hear it in my voice. I just feel, wow, I was, I'm speechless. And of course I had tears in my eyes of gratitude that their willingness to do this, to try, to be committed. And that's the words that they used to me for, when they were interviewing me and talking to me about it, their commitment to assisting blind and visually impaired people to make things more accessible and to give us that freedom.
Mm-hmm. That's really something. That freeing, I was just thinking, that line, it's following a line, but this is just the start of this project. And to think if we could change that line into a map or some type of instrument that's out there, who knows where it could go. But it's neat that they did do it. You're right. I was totally impressed. At first I was wondering, what's this? Then it all came to me when because I remember hearing about Tom as a marathon runner, but to run and to think it's on your waist, it's moving about and still picking up the line. It's like, wow, this could really go someplace. So that's really cool.
What was neat too, as soon as the line stopped, I heard in my ear, it said stop. The audio said stop. So I thought, well, that would be pretty good. However, if they can do that for curbs or say a subway station when you're near the edge or things like that if it can give you that before you even get too close, if there's a way of finding, and that's something I when they asked me my input for that. For me, out on the street, I said, the problem is I cannot see myself walking down the street at this point because it's not going to protect me from obstacles, from things that are above, like our dogs do or a cane does. But who knows? I mean, I don't know. Who knows? This is the beginning.
Yeah, I'm imagining right now. I'm sorry. I'm imagining right now someone with a spray can right in front of you. Oh, she wants to go to the store. But I mean, now if you take that figuratively and put it into technology, that line could be drawn instantaneously with your map coordinates that you want to go. If they could get GPS down to a point, the line doesn't have to be a physical line. It could be information.
Yes.
Of what to do, and then preempting what's coming up, preempting the corner, the crossing, the changing, all that information. How we get the information is really neat. And I'm sure this was, for Thomas, this was probably, wow, running free, not being tethered, no guide dog, he said his guides couldn't keep up with him. Now it's technology. Now, hopefully he had good battery.
Yeah, I don't think he did 26 miles that day, but yeah, the freedom, the amazing, you can hear in the video how he feels and how grateful he is. I called him and let them know when I got home how grateful I was to be a part of and exciting the whole experience was for me. In fact, I kidded when I was walking with them and talking to Google. I said, well, somebody can just walk in front of me with a line down their back.
There you go. And have the song playing, These Boots Were Made for Walking.
Yeah, right. That's
there
right.
You go. Cheryl McNeil Fisher, you're not just a guide dog owner. You also do books. You write books. And I went to your website and I saw you have quite a few books out there available for people.
I do.
So you're an author.
I am. And it started when I was getting one of my guide dogs, one of our big donors to Guiding Eyes. I had been journaling and sharing it with her, and she was enjoying hearing the story. She kept encouraging me to put this in a book. And so many people over the years say, oh, you should write a book. How many times we all hear that. And for me, it was about putting this together. It took me, I think it was 2 years after the fact to get the girl that I wanted to illustrate at that time and be able to put something together. And I did my first one as a learning tool because I'm out speaking to schools and organizations all the time. And so that's how that first book started. And then it just went on. I've got 3 of the Cindy and Sammy books. And then there's the 4th one coming out this year. It's History, Mystery in Philadelphia. And what I do is, say in the zoo book, there's the interactions between the guide dog and these animals. There's 10 animals in the zoo, and they're actually based on a trip that we took to the Philadelphia Zoo. Everything in there is pretty much true. I made up the conversation, but it's based on photos that my friend took, except for the black rhino. We saw a spotted rhino, but at that time, Dateline had something on about the black rhinos, and National Geographic had a story about them too. They were rescuing black rhinos in Africa and helicoptering them out. So I put a black rhino in, and I put a link in for kids or adults and teachers to research that more. But there's one where you'll see the back end of a zebra, because the zebra, they came from way out in the field, and they come walking in. There's 2 of them, and then all of a sudden they bellowed. I don't know if you ever heard a zebra, but they sound like a donkey. And they bellowed at my dog. And then all of a sudden, the one turned around, went about 10 feet, pooped, and then looked back at my dog and went on his way, as if that's what I think of you, dog.
Wow. Nothing against guiding eye dogs, but we're just saying.
No, I just put in the book that one of the predators that go after zebras is the hyena.
Ooh.
So it's a dog type animal. So that's the way I thought, well, it's looking at it as a dog, and then there's one where my dog is Sanka, but Sammy has his nose and his paw up against the glass. And there's a river otter on the other side with his nose and paw up against the glass. And again, that's based on a photo that my friend took, that the river otter came up and my dog went up one little, it was the size of a couple inches up off the ground, and put his paw up there. And the river otter, they were nose to nose and paw to paw.
And these books are geared towards children?
Yes. Yeah. The History, Mystery in Philadelphia, again, it's going to be talking about different guide dog training and things that we do as a guide dog handler and a guide dog team. But in History, Mystery, it goes through the map and walk around the city there, this walking tour of Philadelphia. They've got the ghosts of Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Hancock with them, and it's fun. It's a fun, informational, and learning for children.
What would you suggest to someone who is thinking about writing books, or people are telling them to write books? What words of advice would you have for them?
Just start. I just wrote a memoir with somebody who's 95. She just turned 95, and I wrote her memoir. And sometimes we struggle in writing our own story, and so this helped me in writing hers and asking her questions questions, and I recorded her. And then also knowing whether it's a children's book or a book for adults, just to keep writing, don't get focused on the editing. And then you're going to go back and edit later. There's a lot of editing that goes on. And there's different ways to publish, to be careful about publishing through some of these self-publishing companies that as an independent author, there's ways of publishing, not just through Amazon, but where I get my print books from a place in Colorado. There's different ways, and I'm always willing to teach and help people in any way I can because it took a lot of research on my part. I did send my manuscripts out, and I got some of those rejection letters, plenty of them, but I also had special notes written in, and that's what kept me going. And that's what keeps me going is when I've gotten notes like that. And I look at the children's books, they're still a part of me. There's one series, a sister series, and those are things that my sister and I did. Finding that way to share your story and look at why are you writing it? You know, if you're writing it to become famous, well, hopefully you'll get lucky with that, but there's ways to make money on Amazon doing your ebooks. You know, you need to do a little research. You can't just put one book out there and hope it does great. There's a lot of work behind it. But for me, I just tell people, just start, just do it. And then everything else can fall into place.
How would someone get a hold of you if they wanted to ask you some questions?
Through my website at CherylMcNeilFisher.com. And I welcome questions because, again, I want to give back freely to what's been so freely given to me. You know, it's the way it works for us to be networking together.
That's great. When you weren't born blind, you've always had a little bit of vision, but then things went on that led you to start to use accessible technology, a guide dog and all that. And then after you lost your sight, you actually went back to school.
I did. I was high myopic, and so I had 20/30 vision with contact lenses until I was in my 30s. Last time I drove my car, I had a flash of light, retina detached, and luckily I was less than a mile from my house. But then I went back to school and I got my bachelor's in counseling. And then I was going on to law school. But then I got this punch in the gut. The last session of my last class, a girl was talking about going to this seminary, interfaith seminary down in Manhattan. And I just felt that punch in the gut that I needed to check this out. It was for spiritual counseling. Had no intentions of being part of a church, working at a church, none of that. I wanted to do spiritual counseling, but God had other plans. And I did 2 years there. And then I worked at a church locally for 4 years. It was wonderful as the assistant pastor and youth minister. And I loved it. It was just a wonderful experience along with the spiritual counseling. And then during that time, I went to Bethel University and Seminary out in Minnesota and did their program, which is online except for 2 weeks in the summer and in the winter. No, I didn't like Minnesota in February.
Hey.
Holy moly, it's cold
Luckily,
out there.
I can edit some of that. Nah, it's fine.
Yeah. And I'm constantly learning. I want to keep learning. I'm constantly learning. Yeah.
Well, that's great. So, Cheryl, with the guide dog situation, this isn't your first guide dog. You've had guide dogs, as you mentioned, since the mid-90s. What is it like for someone to decide to get a guide dog? I mean, obviously, you use a cane, you have mobility skills, but there must have been a point in your life where all of a sudden you said, you know what? I'd like to give this a try.
I didn't know anything about guide dogs. And when I had my second retina, my eye detached, I kept saying, I'm going to get a dog. Knew nothing about guide dogs, but it was something that came inside of me. It was a coping mechanism. And then with guiding eyes, they don't even remember how it even got on the radio. It was the only time I ever heard the walkathon announced on the radio up near me out of Ulster County. And I went to, that's Ulster County, New York. And then I went to a walkathon down in Yorktown Heights. And that's where I had my first experience with the guide dogs. And that was in October. And then I put my application in, and I was in the following February class. I wanted to get a guide dog, but I was scared. On the way down, my sister drove me, because I'm only about 45 minutes to an hour from Guiding Eyes. I felt sick. I said, oh my gosh, I don't want to go. I was scared. And back then, I brought my whole computer with me, the big heavy monitor and everything, because I needed to make sure, I could keep doing my schoolwork and stuff. But I was panicked. And then once I was there, I didn't want to leave. I was scared to leave and be back out in the real world. So I kind of understood when people have gone to rehabs, what kind of rehab training, a type of, whether it's recovery, or some people go away when they, lose their sight, whatever. All of a sudden I realized, and I was in this safe environment. I was in a family. I was going through a lot. I was going through a divorce at the time, and as much as I wanted the dog, when I got my ID card that said, I'm an official blind person with a guide dog, and I'm, that says that you've been completed your training. So when I got my ID, I cried because I wanted it, but it was just the reality. A lot of realities happening. And my roommate at the time, she was a OR scrub nurse, and she had lost her sight, and we were about the same age. So the way they paired us up at that time, of course, now you get your own rooms, but I had someone I became best friends with. So it was just a positive experience right from the beginning. Kathy Zabricki, who's, I don't remember her exact title now, but she had become director of training and vice president of something now. Sorry, Kath, but she was one of my trainers. So I've had a relationship with her since day one, too, which has been phenomenal. So I love Guiding Eyes. They have done wonderful training. They're there. It's not like they give you a dog and say, okay, now that's that. They're there 24/7. And what's really nice is that I'm only about 45 minutes to an hour away, depending on traffic. So I can take my dogs down to the vet. I have my retired golden retriever right now, who's turning 13 this month. And I have a shepherd now who will be 4 in March.
Oh, great. So what's it like when you have a retired one? Explain that. Guide dogs are pretty good, for 8, 9, 10 years maybe, or something of that nature, ballpark.
Yeah.
And then you retire him. So you have a choice of keeping the dog, or how's that work?
Yes, because we own our home. So I've been fortunate. I've always been able to keep my dogs. My first guide dog, she is a black lab. And my second was a black lab. And a couple times she snuck into the harness when I wasn't paying attention. And I mean, it didn't take me long to figure it out, because she was a small 60-pound dog. And then my second one was 80 pounds. But most of the time, by the time they're ready to retire, they're like, yeah, okay, let the youngin' go out. But it's been good. My golden retriever has been the longest working dog. He worked 9.5 years. He's going to be 13, but yeah, it's good for them to have the younger dog around, keeps him young, and then it's good playmate for her right now. My dogs, I've had an overlap usually for a couple of years after I've gotten the dogs, but Senka, he's hanging in there. He's doing great. He's got cancer. He's got little aches and pains, but he's still just as strong as he was when I first got him. He just doesn't have the stamina anymore.
What advice would you have for, I want to grab all the advice you can give, for someone who is thinking about getting a guide dog? What advice would you have for them to ask themselves, question themselves, or where do they go? Who do they call?
I'm going to speak for Guiding Eyes. There's several guide dog schools, but for Guiding Eyes, and especially now with the COVID, I don't know. I haven't checked in. I don't know what the waiting list is right now, but you should get your application in. And you need to have mobility skills. You need to be able to use your cane. It's not like you tell the dog, well, go to the post office and he goes. You need to know how to get there and get there safely, because you're a guide dog team and you work together. Yes, there are responsibility, but think about it. Your dog gets to go everywhere with you. You don't have to run home to feed it. You just bring the food with you in a bag. And there's collapsible bowls. There's little easy things you can bring with you for water or to take care of your dog. Picking up after your dog, they teach you how to do it. It's very easy, putting that bag over your hand, sweep down and pick it up and throw it in the garbage. I didn't understand any of that before I got a guide dog. My dog, I'd walk it, let it go to the bathroom and pick it up, or would pick, let it go in the yard and then have to go around and pick it all up all at once with a shovel. Where now, this is so simple and easy that just to pick up after my dog and toss it each time. There's a responsibility, but I trust my dog more than any human being walking me. And with a cane, this is my opinion, any cane user's my opinion. With a cane, I can miss things. My dog doesn't miss, takes me around, and especially a shepherd, she's thinking ahead of time. With my labs or my golden would bring me, say there's a car in the middle of the sidewalk sticking out of the driveway. The lab and the golden have brought me to that obstacle. Then I figure it out. We figure it out where we're going. The shepherds are already thinking and anticipating. And sometimes I don't even know that there was an obstacle there because she'll take me up on the grass or around and she'll get me right out of the way without having to stop. There's a little difference with a shepherd, but I'm grateful for all my dogs. I know it's scary, but it's exciting too. And it's given me freedom. And I just can't imagine not having a dog, because also just think about it. When you're walking down a street with a cane and you're talking to yourself, people think you're crazy. When you're talking to yourself and you're walking down the street with a dog, everybody thinks you're talking to your dog. So I hope that helps a little.
Yeah. The guide dog schools, Guiding Eyes for the Blind, you don't go in and pick your dog. They assess you and find the dog, the match.
Yes. And sometimes you may have some issues where it's not perfect. I've had a couple that have not worked out. In fact, when I got Raven, they had her picked out for me ahead of time. They brought her up to meet me, but there was another shepherd that was in the kennel as well. So they asked me if I'd be willing to test her out. And I said, sure. And so she was taller and they both worked really great. And I said, okay, well, we'll try Kenna. Well, she was a great worker, but I was in class at the time, and when I would groom her, she just didn't like being touched. And for me, I'm a hugger, I'm a lover, and I like to, and I'm going to groom my dogs and pet my dogs all the time. Well, she didn't like it, and she let me know she didn't like it. So she was released and became somebody's really great pet. And luckily, Raven was still there. And right from the get-go, Raven and I were just, boom, just like that. Bonded, because I could tell Kenna, the first shepherd, there was a disconnect. It wasn't a total connection, where with Raven, we just connected. And that's how it's been with my other dogs too. We can just pick up that harness and I can feel the connection. But I have had it happen where it didn't work out. I had another one that didn't work out. So if somebody does get a dog and something happens and doesn't work out, it's not the school's fault. It's not anybody's. It's just, they're dogs. We're humans. And sometimes, it needs tweaking, or maybe you need another dog.
Great. You mentioned that you went to school after losing some eyesight. What kind of technology did you use while going to school?
I learned Zoom text because I still had some better vision than I have now. And that's back when I used cassettes. My books were on cassette. I was able to get them from Princeton, the talking books there that get my textbooks. And in fact, it was so much easier than even when I was in high school or going through school, because having low vision, I struggled reading. So all of a sudden, I was able to listen to my books and I comprehended. It was a great way to learn. I learned new things. Problem I did was I balked at learning JAWS or learning Zoom text in the beginning, and I put my face up close to that screen. So I think that deteriorated my vision a little quicker. I was willing to keep learning, and a lot of the professors I had weren't used to working with a blind student. So they were learning as we went along too. It was a great experience.
And now you're into the Apple Orchard, iPad,
Yes.
the iPhone.
Yes.
How do you write your books?
That's something that the kids love to hear. Well, how do you write? For me, I have found, first of all, that a new technique. If I have a headset on with the microphone, dictation works almost perfectly on my iPhone or my iPad when I'm dictating something in, rather than sitting and typing it. So that's been beneficial, because those of you that know, sometimes if you just have your phone and you're dictating it in, it's hit or miss if it's going to get it right. That's been helpful. but I normally use Pages. In the beginning, I used Microsoft Word on my computer. And that's the nice thing between the PC and the iPad and iPhone. I can go back and forth between the two. And Microsoft Word works with Pages. And with Pages, you can save in a Word document. And I find Pages being better as far as spell check now than I had when I was doing Microsoft Word. I just seemed with the Windows 10, I was struggling with that. But again, I was using at the time, still using the magnification. So now on the PC, I'm learning the voice also. Then I have people edit also. But some of the formatting I can do, but I do have somebody else who does some formatting for me before I actually go to publish.
And that's pretty much normal that an author has an editor, of sorts.
Right. Yeah. So I might have to do maybe an extra step here or there. But the memoir I just wrote, I was fortunate enough that one of the employees at the nursing home used to work for one of the major publishers. So she did editing. I was able to get her and she helped out. So it was a joint effort in editing. And she not only did the basic editing, but she also did the line editing and editing my book. And it was great. Yeah.
Yeah, it always seems like when I'm talking to an author, they always talk about the team. Lois Threlkin from South Africa was talking about getting to know your editors and the relationship that you build with them. And the community of authors and publishers is a really great community. There's a gentleman from Minnesota here, Daniel Bernstrom, and he released his third book. He's visually impaired. He wrote the book One Day in the Eucalyptus Tree. It's a children's book. Okay. Gator. And it was just neat to be able to talk to the authors and yourself and find out, that the relationship that they build with their editors. It seems like a good place if you want to be an author, that there's a good community out there.
And as an indie author now, as an independent author, just in 5 years, how things have changed in 5 years since my first book came out, that libraries and bookstores, they're more open to the indie authors, where in the beginning, how publishing continually is changing so much faster. And they have more awards for the indie authors now also. The other thing, as a children's author, I have relationships with my illustrators. If you're with one of the big publishing companies, you don't have the choice of who illustrates your book, nor do you have the choice a lot of times who's going to narrate your books. But for me, I have my main illustrator now is in Spain. She doesn't speak English. I don't speak Spanish yet. We work really well together. And another one is in Indonesia, who has done one of my other books. And then the narrators I've been able to pick, and I found someone who did a wonderful job for my audiobooks on Audible. So yeah, I'm very fortunate in finding the relationships that I've built and people I've met along the way.
I also seen on your website that you have pages they can download to color and then they can resubmit it and you'll use those. Are those pages from your book?
Yes, I made coloring pages from the illustrations. So utilizing the illustrations also when I do presentations at schools, because sometimes teachers or kids, they'll ask me if I can do a demonstration. And it's hard sometimes when you're in an auditorium and if the kids are whether they're sitting in the chairs or they're sitting on the floor, it's not easy. So with my illustrations, they're on 18 by 27 inch poster boards so that I can show them how we stand and on an escalator, where my feet are positioned, where the dog is. I can use some of my illustrations from my books. Yeah, I've made coloring pages. There's about there's 3 from each book that can be downloaded, and there's a little description of what they are. And then if you want more coloring pages, email me and I'll be happy to get some more to you.
And you can find all that information at CherylMcNeilFisher.com, right?
Yes. And we're putting together a kids newsletter magazine that we're collecting articles written by kids for kids and some of their drawings and illustrations. So I'm constantly working with others to find different ways, especially now during this pandemic, to touch and help children and feel like they're involved with something else, something extra, positive. And if people have suggestions, let me know. I'm willing to do what we can. In fact, one of the books Surprise Sammy, it's your birthday, I wrote with a 7th grader. I met her at a Y2 Kids event at Stewart Airport where we had all kinds of vendors and the kids come through and they're checking out careers. And one girl said she was an artist and she liked to draw. And she ended up following up with me about doing a book. And she came up with the illustrations, the names of the characters and some of the ideas. And then my illustrator in Spain went and digitized them, tweaked them and digitized them for me. But yeah, that was done with a 7th grader. And I have another one, The Bully Bites the Dust, that came from an idea from a 6th grader. So yeah, I'm always willing to work with kids on writing their books too.
Well, I think it's a great thing. What you're doing, Cheryl, is you're crossing over from the blindness community into the sighted community and with children who are being exposed to some positives about blindness. Because I remember when I lost I like you, it was in my 30s, and I didn't know anything about blindness. I really didn't. I was pretty naive. But now with your books and you're going out there, speaking, demonstrations that you're doing, you're exposing them to a positive side of blindness. And I think that's really important because educating the world about inclusion and differences that some of us have is important. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. And, when you say that, when I got my first guide dog and I had a lot of questions about being blind, they told me I would learn, some of the people who had been blind, they said, you're going to learn how to be blind. And I'm like, what? Didn't understand that until now. You probably understand too, just knowing the way the wind changes or the air, even if the air is not moving and you're inside of a building, all of a sudden knowing there's a wall there or there's not a wall because you feel the difference on our faces. And it doesn't mean my sense, when people ask me, have your senses gotten better? I don't think that. I think I'm more in tune with things around me, surrounding me, and that have enhanced those things. And it's because I'm more aware, I'm paying attention. Yeah.
I think there's a lot to be said about things that you don't even know you don't know. Because right. I didn't know that I was more in tune with my surroundings and everything. I have some peripheral sight that I can use, but when I put on a mask, I notice there's a difference. There's something different. And because slowly you learn to take in so much information to compensate for what you don't get for information that you're adjusting. And it's just like when someone's losing sight, they don't realize how much sight they're losing. Then all of a sudden one day they go, oh, wait, I used to be able to read this or something, and they slowly make adjustments to it like yourself did, from Zoom text over to using a voice synthesizer screen reader type of device.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I noticed during the seasonal changes, when the sun shifts, that's when I noticed what's changed in my vision by going out by my backyard, by the pool or something, because the sun is in a different position. So each year when the time changes or the sun shifts, I can become aware of how much I can no longer read, but also outdoors, I notice it when the seasons change.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I noticed when I was going through the biggest phase of sight loss was the point between the sky and the ground in front of me. It may be trees, it may be houses, but there's a gray area that kept getting bigger. I could tell the sky, I could tell the ground in front of me, but identifying everything else in between was getting a little more grayer.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to put it too.
And that's usually the stuff you run into.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And for people who are visually impaired, again, I balked at learning Braille. I'm not a Braille reader, but I did learn basic Braille. And my rehab person was telling me how she used it, and she's cited for finding things in her closet like spices or something. I am so glad that just knowing basic Braille that I can label something and just touch it and know what it is. So I encourage people that maybe you might balk at learning Braille to be able to read it. It really does make life a lot easier when we can use tactile to figure out what things are.
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't know anything about blindness. And yet when they started to teach me stuff about it, I acted as if I was very well educated on blindness. Like I was going to make all the decisions I wanted to make. And
Right.
I can read probably 43 words a minute in Braille, which is not productive. I would not be able to read the breakfast menu, and I'd have to order lunch because it'd take me that long to get through it.
Yeah.
But yeah, for identifying spices, that's a huge area of, when you go into your cupboard cabinet or some of your labeling devices, tips, tricks, and techniques. That's what we do on Blind Ability. Sometimes we put out stuff like that. Just those small little things that get you over that hurdle.
Yes.
I always like it when people figure out a system that they label something and then they have to do the whole system over again every time they go grocery shopping. In a sense, it's like, wait, that's not very productive. That's so if you can figure out tips. Well, Cheryl, we get a little distracted here, but it's blindness. It's such a world of, you're always continuously learning, and it's a lifetime.
I'd like to put in a little plug for the American Council for the Blind. Mm-hmm. When they started these community calls, there was 8 per week. Now there's like about 80 per week. And it's amazing that they have grown, and ACB Radio has 7 channels now. There are calls, Zoom calls, or classes or webinars on almost anything you can think of. And I've learned a lot on the Apple technology. There's tricks around the house, different things. I have one call that's a Serenity type call. It's at 10 o'clock on the Eastern on Monday nights. But then I also do a writing workshop every other Friday at 1. And I have been inspired and learning, and there's so many people have learned how to facilitate and host on Zoom. It's just been an amazing opening up a world that I didn't realize. I've been a member of ACB since 1994, but I've never been involved like I have been since this pandemic. So for anybody who's feeling lonely, and you don't have to be alone, like Thanksgiving Day, we had calls on the hour, every hour, and people just supporting people. There's so many different types of calls for you to find something, even one a week, something that you don't have to be out there by yourself. And even after the pandemic, having this community, it's amazing. I can't say enough about this membership of people that I have found. And you do not need to be a member of ACB to be a part of the community calls. And you can, by acb.org, I forget the email right now, but there's a daily community email list, so you can get the information every single day. I encourage you to look into it. And again, feel free, if you can't find it online, just get in touch with me and I'll be happy to help you out.
And you can find more about Cheryl on the web at CherylMcNeilFisher.com. Cheryl,
yes,
thank you for putting that out there about that video from Google's Guideline.
Yeah,
Project
Google
Guideline.
Project Guideline. Yes.
I'll put a link for that in the show notes, as well as and your website and acb.org. It's great information because, anytime you can find out more information on blindness or what other people are doing, it's good as gold. Because like I mentioned, I didn't even know where they kept the blinds, Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, I know. Me is. And as you know, there's not one organization that has all the answers. It's about networking and finding who does what and where we can get help with certain things. And that's why, for me, being able to share with other people, because I've done the research and I've done some, and there's still things I don't know. So yeah, and the accessibility that's coming too with I'm sure you can do a show on that Spectrum Access app now. How many shows and things are becoming accessible? You don't need to be just Spectrum, that there's movies, shows that are audio description. So there's just so much out there. Yeah, there's just so much information out there. So anyway, thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate you asking me to be a part of this.
Oh, you bet. And thanks for being part of the project, because, that to me is like having Google, a pretty big company, get involved in accessibility and making stuff inclusive, and just for them to step up to the plate and work with Guiding Eyes for the Blind. Great stuff. Well, Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. And praise Google for their work. So, yeah, and everyone else who's working on accessibility. So thank you so much. And thank you, Jeff, for all that you do. I love your podcast. There's so much information, and your app is right on my main home screens.
Oh, really?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeff. Really, it is. And that was before this call. It's been on there for a couple of years. So, yeah.
You just put it on there right now so you remember who you're talking to.
No, it's been on there for a couple of years. So thank you so much, Jeff.
All right.
I appreciate it.
Such a great time talking to Cheryl. And you can find out more about Cheryl and check out her books on her website at CherylMcNeilFisher.com. And if you have any questions, want to leave any comments, or give us some feedback, give us a call at 612-367-6093. We'd love to hear from you. And you can check out all the podcasts just by subscribing to Blind Abilities on your favorite podcatcher. That's 2 words, Blind Abilities. And a big shout out to Chi Chow for his beautiful music. You find more about Chi Chow on Twitter at El Chi Chow. Chi Chow, Chi Chow. And from all of us here at Blind Abilities, through these challenging times, to you, your family, and friends, stay well, stay informed, and stay strong. I want to thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. And until next time, bye-bye.
When we share
what we see
through each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap between
the limited expectations and the reality
of blind abilities.
The realities of blind abilities.
Blind abilities.